What was your "so that's how it works" moment? The first time I saw a lockpicking video on the internet, where they use one of those clear locks, so you can see what's going on. I did not know birds had 6 until I was 22 and my then boyfriend pointed it out when looking out the window. I watched some National Geographic show when I was little about salmon and how the eggs get laid and the male swims over and spreads the sauce. At least that is how I remembered it, and I just figured that is how all egg laying beings did it. Seriously, please like and subscribe and comment something nice for your favorite Reddit slave. For years I wondered why that bit on the end of tape measures was always wobbly. Like why Coldno at any manufacturers just use decent rivets. It pissed me off, so I smacked mine with a hammer to stop it wobbling. It is supposed to wobble. It is to allow for the thickness of that end hook depending on whether you are measuring an inside or outside edge. I facepalmed so fucking hard when I overheard that in the office years later. Not my aha moment. But I recently explained in another Reddit thread how candles work. Basically, the flame melts the wax, which is then drawn up the wick through a form of capillary action. https://wikipedia.org/wiki/capillary_action. As the liquid wax gets closer and closer to the flame, it eventually gets hot enough that it vaporizes. Being a hydrocarbon, the wax itself is flammable, and so the wax vapor combusts. So many people, when I explained that, had this moment where they suddenly realized how the wick doesn't just burn away to nothing, and where the magically disappearing wax goes. I thought it was common knowledge that the wax acts to fuel the flame, but apparently not. Northern lights. I never understood what they were until I read about how, since the magnetic field is closer to the earth near the poles, it doesn't shield the atmosphere from plasma as well, so it burns off at a lower, respectively, altitude. That is also why it makes that buzzing noise. I always wondered why McDonald's McFlurries came with those thick, hollow spoons. Turns out the spoon clips into the mixing machine and acts as the mixing paddle to blend the ice cream and candy together. Watching The Big Short. Finally understood the economic crisis of 2008. Then years late, was taking a product design class with a bunch of engineering students. We had a group assignment to redesign that little staple remover thing, the thing that clamps down, and you used to play with it as a kid like it was a mouth. Anyway, in my early 20s I realized that my proposed redesign was to remove the staple by first bending the staple corners up before pulling out the staple so it wouldn't destroy the paper. I realized, in my mid-20s, that I had been using that fucking thing entirely wrong for years and had been destroying paper by ripping the staple out from the front first instead of using the tool properly and starting from the backside. I felt good though, because the other 4 people in my team also had been using it wrong for years. I'm gonna feel stupid, I'm sure, but the first time I jumped into a pool and had let most of the air out of my lungs at like age 17 and sunk to the bottom, I had that moment. And it's been great understanding basic physics that I should have picked up on forever ago. And it's super helpful when I'm in water now. When I jacked off for the first time. So that is how it works. That was a while ago, and back then there was no internet or easy access to porn. Early 70s in Belgium, so you cold know it, find out on your own. Kids at school were making jerk off gestures and I finally got it. I almost passed out that first time. As a kid, I thought the baptismal font in church was a bird bath, until I finally attended a baby's baptism with my parents and saw how the priest used it. https://wiki.org/wiki/BAPTISMAL_FONT/MEDIA/FILE @Lingo_kicker_document JPG. Mainly just spreadsheets at work. Everything feeds automatically, but when one breaks you have to go digging and repair it. Then you realize where it gets the numbers from. Really boring, but yeah. Power structures and incentives. https://yao2b/rstl7 and ir7gs. I always found it frustrating and perplexing to watch people in positions of power fail to implement seemingly obvious solutions. That video made it abundantly clear to me how much energy and compromise goes into simply maintaining those structures. When programming, I copy code all the time without knowing 100% how it works. Everyone does it. It started with teacher's code, slightly modified for homeworks, then moved on to the real world, where I do it for a living. Stack Overflow is a goldmine for some stuff. Often it's just some code from another part of the same code base I'm working on. Every now and then it breaks, or doesn't work out of the box, and I have to take a serious look at it, so that's how it works. Was a freshman in high school and an unpopular guy farted in class. Universal reaction was mocking and disgust. He was teased mercilessly for weeks. Months later in another class, a popular guy, varsity athlete, did the same thing. Universal class reaction was laughing, and his buddy gave him a high five. No one teased him. Note, I was neither guy in this story, but I learned it's not really what you do, it's who you are that counts to people. Cutting a bite of steak against the grain before eating it. My mom told me years ago that if meat was too hard to cut using a butter knife, that I should cut the meat with the grain. I never understood why you got the hawking big knife with the big wooden handle at restaurants when you ordered steak. Then, someone told me to cut against the grain so that I would be chewing with the grain. Total gamma changer. How most jobs are just a chain of simple steps. I had been working at my job for a few years. I slowly became the guy who knew everything and trained everyone. Eventually we had to do a redesign to handle more volume and higher output. So I redesign our processes and workstation layouts. This leads to me having to write up softwares on everything I have updated. I am in the middle of writing them up and it clicks. Even for the harder processes, it is just a longer amount of basic steps. I think I already knew it, I just never thought about it. Now whenever something new or challenging comes up, I'll just break it down into easier to manage steps. Made my work way easier thinking of it that way. I fell asleep beside my fridge after a night of drinking. Woke up nice and warm and wondered why my fridge was so hot. I then realized that it was a heat pump and had to reread old thermo notes. Vapor compression cycle. What important work the CDC does to stop outbreaks and contain deadly viruses. Read a fiction book that the author heavily detailed the work they put in that he actually did tremendous research on and was non-fiction. Book is called Pandemic by A.G. Riddle. Amazing book, even more amazing sequel. I recently devoured the 2 books in 4 days. I feel so bad that I used to go on 8ch and laugh at the Ebola Chan page years back. It was funny back then, but now I just feel sorry about it. Ebola is no joke. The first time I saw this, https://imga.com/q5ypc6s. GIF. Salaried employees benefit the company, more work for the money. In the US, in my mid-30s I realized why many companies pay their employees a salary rather than hourly. Salaried employees rarely work a 40-hour work week, while hourly employees rarely work overtime. Yes, I understand there are always exceptions, but hear me out. I worked for a privately held company that paid everyone a salary. It was a tech company that pushed the employees to do massive amounts of work rather than hire the appropriate amount of staff. We were always struggling to catch up, but in the 7 years I was there, it never happened. On a regular basis I worked late and took work home in the weekends. I loved our clients, so it didn't feel like a burden. Several years and I became a single parent who needed work-life balance. I couldn't stay late as often, and working from home on the weekends became rare. When my children were at their father's I did a fair amount of travel for my work, but my workload never backed off. While working 65+ hours a week, I rarely saw the light at the end of the tunnel. When I had to enforce a balance, my productivity was cited as poor. I was still working over 40 hours a week. Now I understand there are companies that don't abuse their employees this way, but this is an extreme case. Every salary job I've had required me to travel at times. I'd spend an entire day traveling, often 1012 hours on each end of my trip, but it was simply a part of the job. I didn't reap any benefits of those long hours, it simply was expected, and no, I was not hired to travel. It became part of the job later. I currently work in a position that pays me hourly. Towards my salary. If I work any overtime in the year, I make more money than my salary. If I work 45 hours, I get time and a half for those 30 minutes. I'm expected to take my breaks, which is hard for me to do because it was looked at negatively previously. And when the clock strikes 3:30 PM you leave. You stop what you're doing and it will be there in the morning. It's so damn weird to me. I do have events that require me to work over 40 hours a week, but I'm paid for it. If my workload allows, I can juggle my week and take time off to make it a 40-hour week or take the extra pay.